not going to happen. In a few moments, I will sign a historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. Reciprocal, that means they do it to us and we do it to them. Very simple, can't get any simpler than that. This is one of the most important days, in my opinion, in American history. It's our declaration of economic independence. For years, hardworking American citizens were forced to sit on the sidelines as other nations got rich and powerful, much of it at our expense. But now it's our turn to prosper, and in so doing, use trillions and trillions of dollars to reduce our taxes and pay down our national debt, and it'll all happen very quickly. With today's action, we are finally going to be able to make America great again, greater than ever before. Jobs and factories will come roaring back into our country, and you see it happening already. We will supercharge our domestic industrial base. We will pry open foreign markets and break down foreign trade barriers. And ultimately, more production at home will mean stronger competition and lower prices for consumers. This will be indeed the golden age of America. It's coming back, and we're going to come back very strongly. We're pleased to be joined on this momentous occasion by Vice President J.D. Vance. J.D., thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Where are you, J.D.? No, that wasn't too hard to find. I was looking, you know, he likes to take a low-key attitude, so it'd usually be sitting right in front. He's gaining a lot of confidence, Mike, isn't he? And nearly my entire cabinet is here, as well as Speaker Mike Johnson, who's done an amazing job. And with the great success we had last night in Florida, we have a majority of 7. And 7's like a lot when we had it at 1, right? You've done a fantastic job. And many of the members of the House and Senate are with us. Senators, Congressmen, thank you all for being with us. We appreciate it. For decades, the United States slashed our trade barriers on other countries, while those nations placed massive tariffs on our products and created outrageous non-monetary barriers to decimate our industries. And in many cases, the non-monetary barriers were worse than the monetary ones. They manipulated their currencies, subsidized their exports, stole our intellectual property, imposed exorbitant VAT taxes to disadvantage our products, adopted unfair rules and technical standards, and created filthy pollution havens. They were absolutely filthy, but they always came to us and they said, we're violating, we should pay for it. It's all detailed in a very big report by the U.S. Trade Representative on foreign trade barriers, and I'll just hold it up for you. It's available, and you don't have to pay too much. As I understand it, you'll pay nothing. It's a lot of work for something, actually, because it's a special book. It's very, frankly, it's very upsetting when you read it, when you see what people have been doing to us for 30 years. This all happened with no response from the United States of America, none whatsoever. But those days are over. Let me offer just a few examples of the vicious attacks our workers have faced for so many years. The United States charges other countries only a 2.4 tariff on motorcycles. Meanwhile, Thailand and others are charging much higher prices, like 60%. India charges 70%. Vietnam charges 75%, and others are even higher than that. Likewise, until today, the United States has for decades charged a 2.5 tariff. Think of that, 2.5% on foreign-made automobiles. The European Union charges us more than 10% tariffs, and they have 20% VATs, much, much higher. India charges 70%, and perhaps worst of all are the non-monetary restrictions imposed by South Korea, Japan, and very many other nations. As a result of these colossal trade barriers, 81% of the cars in South Korea are made in South Korea. 94% of the cars in Japan are made in Japan. Toyota sells 1 million foreign-made automobiles into the United States, and General Motors sells almost none. Ford sells very little. None of our companies are allowed to go into other countries. And I say that, friend and foe. And in many cases, the friend is worse than the foe in terms of trade. But such horrendous imbalances have devastated our industrial base and put our national security at risk. I don't blame these other countries at all for this calamity. I blame former presidents and past leaders who weren't doing their job. They let it happen, and they let it happen to an extent that nobody can even believe. That's why, effective at midnight, we will impose a 25% tariff on all foreign-made automobiles. Thank you. Brian, I'd like to have you come up here for a second, okay? I just see him sitting. He's been a fan of ours, and he understands this business a lot better than the economists, a lot better than anybody. Brian, say a few words, please, would you?
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. It's a great honor to have you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. President. I grew up just north of Detroit, Michigan, in Macomb County, known as the home of the Reagan Democrats. My first vote for president was for Ronald Reagan. I thought that was going to be the best president I ever saw in my lifetime until Donald J. Trump came along. I have watched my entire life, I have watched plant after plant after plant in Detroit and in the metro Detroit area close. There are now plants sitting idle. There are now plants that are underutilized, and Donald Trump's policies are going to bring product back into those underutilized plants. There's going to be new investment. There's going to be new plants built. And the UAW members, and I brought 20 of them with me, they're sitting right over here. We support Donald Trump's policies on tariffs 100%. So, Mr. President, we can't thank you enough. And in 6 months or a year, we're going to begin to see the benefits. I can't wait to see what's happening 3 or 4 years down the road. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. What a great guy. He got it right from the beginning. He got it before almost anybody else. This group over there, they got it too. And, you know, we won the state of Michigan. We won almost all of them. But we won Michigan by a lot, and I want to just thank you all. The auto workers were fantastic. The Teamsters were fantastic. Everyone was pretty good, I will tell you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. You're going to be very happy very soon, and you probably see what's happening with all of the, not only car companies, but car companies in particular. You see it with all of the ones they're moving, they're announcing day in, day out. You're seeing it. Nobody's ever seen anything like that. With today's actions, we're also standing up for our great farmers and ranchers who are brutalized by nations all over the world. Brutalized. Canada, by the way, imposes a 250 to 300% tariff on many of our dairy products. They do the first can of milk. They do the first little carton of milk at a very low price, but after that it gets bad, and then it gets up to 275, 300%. So when they're figuring what's Canada charging, they say, oh, about 2%, 3%. But take a look at what happens down the road. When you look a little bit, it's not a pretty picture, and we don't like it, and it's not fair. It's not fair to our farmers. It's not fair to our country. And with countries like Canada, you know, we subsidize a lot of countries and keep them going and keep them in business. In the case of Mexico, it's $300 billion a year. In the case of Canada, it's close to $200 billion a year. And I say, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? I mean, at what point do we say, you got to work for yourselves, and you got to, this is why we have the big deficits. This is why we have that amount of debt that's been placed on our heads over the last number of years, and we're really not taking it anymore. Through non-tariff barriers, the European Union bans imports of most American poultry. You understand? They say, we want to send you our cars, we want to send you everything, but we're not going to take anything that you have. Australia bans, and they're wonderful people and wonderful everything, but they ban American beef, yet we imported $3 billion of Australian beef from them just last year alone. They won't take any of our beef. They don't want it because they don't want it to affect their farmers. And you know what? I don't blame them, but we're doing the same thing right now, starting about midnight tonight, I would say. And China charges American rice farmers an overquota, it's called, a tariff rate of 65%. South Korea charges 50. Actually, they charge different, from 50% to 513%. And Japan, our friend, charges us 700%. But that's because they don't want us selling rice and other things. Who can blame them, Madam Secretary? Agriculture, great job you did on eggs, by the way. The egg prices came down 50%. You got them down 50% once we got involved. They were going through the sky. The egg prices, they were going through the sky, and you did a fantastic job. Now we have lots of eggs, and they're much cheaper, down about 59% now, and they're going down further. We charge 2.8% for so many things that other countries are charging 200%, 300%, and 400% for. If imposing tariffs and protective barriers made nations poor, then every country on earth would be racing to eliminate these policies, and China would be the first on line. They run a very strong country, but they're not first in line, and the American people are paying a very big price. From 1789 to 1913, we were a tariff-backed nation, and the United States was proportionately the wealthiest it has ever been. So wealthy, in fact, that in the 1880s, they established a commission to decide what they were going to do with the vast sums of money they were collecting. We were collecting so much money so fast, we didn't know what to do with it. Isn't that a nice problem to have? What do you think, Marco? Good problem? Marco would love that problem. But we don't have that problem anymore, but we're not going to have it very much longer, I will tell you. But they collected so much money, they actually formed a commission to determine what they were going to do with the money, who they were going to give it to, and how much. Then in 1913, for reasons unknown to mankind, they established the income tax so that citizens, rather than foreign countries, would start paying the money necessary to run our government. Then in 1929, it all came to a very abrupt end with the Great Depression, and it would have never happened if they had stayed with the tariff policy. It would have been a much different story. They tried to bring back tariffs to save our country, but it was gone. It was gone. It was too late. Nothing could have been done. It took years and years to get out of that depression, far longer than even FDR had that office right over there for a long period of time. The ramp system, that's rather intricate, was built because of him, and every time you walk up, you think of him, and he did a great job in many ways, but it lasted long beyond his terms, as you know. But it's not too late any longer, and we're going to start being smart, and we're going to start being very wealthy again. We're going to be wealthy as a country because they've taken so much of our wealth away from us. We're not going to let that happen. We truly can be very wealthy. We can be so much wealthier than any country. It's not even believable, but we're getting smart. Nearly a century later, in the face of unrelenting economic warfare, the United States can no longer continue with a policy of unilateral economic surrender. We cannot pay the deficits of Canada, Mexico, and so many other countries. We used to do it. We can't do it anymore. We take care of countries all over the world. We pay for their military. We pay for everything they have to pay, and then when you want to cut back a little bit, they get upset that you're not taking care of them any longer. But we have to take care of our people, and we're going to take care of our people first, and I'm sorry to say that. And today we're standing up for the American worker, and we are finally putting America first. In Sleepy Joe Biden's last year in office, the United States hemorrhaged 100,000 manufacturing jobs, and the number was going through the roof at levels never seen before. And our trade deficit reached a record $1.2 trillion, which is unheard of. Since the beginning of NAFTA, the worst trade deal ever made, it was a horror show. I was able to terminate it. They all said you'd never be able to get it out. We had to get approval from Congress to get it terminated. We had to live with that deal. It was the worst deal, worst trade deal ever made by far. But since the very beginning of NAFTA, our country lost 90,000 factories. Think of what that is, 90,000. Think about putting a map up and putting tax on it. You wouldn't have enough room. 90,000. I said, is that possible? We had it checked 4 different times, and it was actually somewhat higher than that. And 5 million manufacturing jobs were lost while racking up trade deficits of $19 trillion. That was the worst trade deal ever made. As a result of these gigantic losses, foreign nations now own $26 trillion more of American assets than think of this, than the Americans own of their own foreign assets or other foreign assets. The United States can no longer produce enough antibiotics to treat our sick. We have a tremendous problem. We have to go to foreign countries to treat our sick. If anything ever happened from a war standpoint, we wouldn't be able to do it. We import virtually all of our computers, phones, televisions, and electronics. We used to dominate the field, and now we import it all from different countries. A single shipyard in China now produces more ships every year than all of the American shipyards combined. Think of that. And it was a business that we used to dominate. We used to dominate it totally. In short, chronic trade deficits are no longer merely an economic problem. They're a national emergency that threatens our security and our very way of life. It's a very great threat to our country. And for these reasons, starting tomorrow, the United States will implement reciprocal tariffs on other nations. It's been a long time since we even thought of that. We used to think about it a lot. We didn't think about it for many decades, and you see what's happened. For nations that treat us badly, we will calculate the combined rate of all their tariffs, non-monetary barriers, and other forms of cheating. And because we are being very kind, we're kind people, very kind. You're not so kind when you got ripped off with your salaries. My auto worker friends and my Teamster friends and all of the unions that typically voted Democrat, they're not voting Democrat anymore because worker, whether union or non-worker, they're for the Republicans now. That's what happened. But we will charge them approximately half of what they are and have been charging us. So the tariffs will be not a full reciprocal. I could have done that, yes, but it would have been tough for a lot of countries who didn't want to do that. I'd like to see the chart if you have it. Could you bring it up, Howard? This is our great Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick. Thanks, Howard. So if you look at that, China, first row, China, 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So 67%, I think you can, for the most part, see it. Those with good eyes, with bad eyes. We didn't want to bring, it's very windy out here. We didn't want to bring out the big charts because it had no chance of standing. Fortunately, we came armed with a little smaller chart. So 67%, so we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal tariff of 34%. I think, in other words, they charge us, we charge them less. So how can anybody be upset? They will be because we never charge anybody anything, but now we're going to charge. European Union, they're very tough, very, very tough traders. You know, you think of European Union, very friendly. They rip us off. It's so sad to see. It's so pathetic. 39%, we're going to charge them 20%, so we're charging them essentially half. Vietnam, great negotiators, great people. They like me, I like them. The problem is they charge us 90%. We're going to charge them 46% tariff. Taiwan, where they took all of our computer chips and semiconductors. We used to be the king, right? We were everything. We had all of it. Now we have almost none of it, except the biggest company is coming in. We're going to end up with almost 40%. Lee Zeldin's working to get their approvals. And it's an amazing company. Mr. Wei, of one of the great companies of the world, actually. They're coming in from Taiwan, and they're going to build one of the biggest plants in the world, maybe the biggest for that. But 64%, we're going to charge them 32%. Japan, very, very tough, great people. And again, I don't blame the people for doing it. I think they're very smart in doing it. I blame the people that sat right in that Oval Office, right over there, right behind the Resolute desk or whichever desk they chose. Japan, 46%. They would charge us 46% and much higher for certain items like cars, you know, little items like cars. 46%, we're charging them 24%. India, very, very tough, very, very tough. The Prime Minister just left, and he's a great friend of mine, but I said, you're a friend of mine, but you're not treating us right. They charge us 52%. You have to understand, we charge them almost nothing for years and years and decades, and it was only 7 years ago when I came in, we started with China and charged them. We took in hundreds of billions of dollars from China in tariffs, and they understood, honestly. President Xi understood. He said, look, I understand, and the other countries, and they all understand. We're going to have to go through a little tough love, maybe, but they all understand. They're ripping us off, and they understood it. Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe. He was a fantastic man. He was unfortunately taken from us, assassination. But I went to him and I said, Shinzo, we have to do something. Trade is not fair. And he said, I know that, I know that. And he was a great gentleman. He was a fantastic man, but he understood immediately what I was talking about. I said, Shinzo, we have to do something. He said, I know that. And we worked out a deal, and it would have been a much better deal, but frankly, there were many years left in the deal that was made previous to my getting there, but it was something. If you look at Switzerland, 61% to 31%, Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia, oh, look at Cambodia, 97%. We're going to bring it down to 49. They made a fortune with the United States of America. United Kingdom, 10%, and we'll go 10%. So we'll do the same thing. South Africa, oh, 60%, 30%, and they've got some bad things going on in South Africa. You know, we're paying them billions of dollars, and we cut the funding because a lot of bad things are happening in South Africa. The fake news ought to be looking at it. They don't want to report it. Brazil, 10%, 10%. Bangladesh is 74%. So you see what's going on. Pakistan, 58%. Sri Lanka, 88%. So what we're doing is we're taking not the full, we could take the full 88%. Thanks a lot, Howard. He's doing a very good job. How's he doing, all right? I think you better take it with you. It's not going to last very long. He's going to put it, it's going to follow you down with the wind. I brought a hat just in case it got too windy, but here, would anybody like a hat? I'm not giving it to a cabinet. I'm giving it to the auto workers. Come here. Thank you, fellas. Get it. That's it. That's it. They deserve it more than our cabinet. Our cabinet has plenty of hats. But you see the numbers. The numbers are so disproportionate. They're so unfair. At the same time, we will establish a minimum baseline tariff of 10%. You notice that on the chart. And that'll be on other countries to help rebuild our economy and to prevent cheating. So we're going to have a minimum of cheating, and we're going to be very severe on the people that at the gate that watch the tariffs and watch the product coming in, because there's been a lot of bad things happening at the gate because the money is so enormous that you're talking about. There's never been probably anything like it in terms of the enormity, and there are a lot of bad things happen at the people that do the check-in, and they're looking at 10-year jail sentences if they do play. We're going to treat them so good, but if they cheat, the repercussions are going to be extremely strong. Foreign nations will finally be asked to pay for the privilege of access to our market, the biggest market in the world. We're right now the biggest market in the world. We had a great country 4 years ago in terms of the economics. We were doubling up on China. We were doing so well. Nobody was going to catch us, but so much of it slipped away over the last 4 years under Biden. I campaigned on this policy throughout last year, and today that promise was made, and it was also a promise, as you know, that was kept. Promises made, promises kept. To any company that objects to our common sense reciprocal tariffs, again, reciprocal, back and forth, back and forth. And I call this kind reciprocal. This is not full reciprocal. This is kind reciprocal. But what we do is we cut it in half. We charge them. My answer is very simple. If they complain, if you want your tariff rate to be zero, then you build your product right here in America, because there is no tariff if you build your plant, your product in America. And we've seen companies coming in like we've never seen before. Likewise to all of the foreign presidents, prime ministers, kings, queens, ambassadors, and everyone else who will soon be calling to ask for exemptions from these tariffs. I say, terminate your own tariffs, drop your barriers, don't manipulate your currencies. They manipulate their currencies like nobody can even believe, which is a bad, bad thing and very devastating to us. And start buying tens of billions of dollars of American goods. Tariffs give our country protection against those that would do us economic harm. And many people were looking to do us economic harm. Maybe not so obviously, but they were doing tremendous economic harm. But even more importantly, they will give us growth. These tariffs are going to give us growth like you haven't seen before. And it'll be something very special to watch. I am so looking forward. And Brian, it's going to happen even faster than you said. You know, you might say, but it's already started. It's already started. Work's already begun on plants all around the country. And you see that as before. These are big, rich companies. We have $61 billion started on a big plant going up. It's going to be announced over the next 2 days, and they already started work. Many of these the biggest companies in the world, they've committed to build, build, build. We're going to build, 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 sir. And they came here to see me, and they wanted to know if they could have a press conference. I do as many as I can. I'm pretty busy trying to stop Russia and Ukraine and the Middle East. We got to stop that. We got to stop the Houthis, which we're making tremendous. They like shooting ships down and out of the water, sinking ships. They get a kick out of it, but they're not getting such a kick out of it now, are they, Mr. Secretary? They're not getting such a kick out of that now. But here are just a short list of some of the companies that have already announced and committed to investment. And this is a company that built its factories and its plants in China. Apple is going to spend $500 billion. They never spent money like that here. They're going to build their plants here. SoftBank, OpenAI, and Oracle, great companies, are investing $500 billion almost immediately. NVIDIA, a hot company, is investing hundreds of billions of dollars. They just announced. TSMC, the biggest, most important company in the world of chips from Taiwan, with no investment from us, is investing $200 billion. And they said the reason was, number one, the election of November 5th, and number two, the tariffs. They don't want to pay the tariffs, and the way they're not paying it is to build their plant here. So we're going to go from almost no percentage. We used to have 100% of the chip market. Now it's all in Taiwan. Almost all of it's in Taiwan. A couple of other countries, but mostly in Taiwan. And think of it. We had 100%. We lost it because of people in that office that didn't do their job. They allowed it to be stolen from us. Johnson & Johnson, great company, $55 billion. Eli Lilly, $27 billion. Meta is investing $500 billion. Wow. DeMac is investing $20 billion. CMA, CGM, $20 billion. And then you have Merck and Clarios, Stellantis, General Motors, GE Aerospace, Honda, Nissan, Hyundai are all putting in billions and billions of dollars, and they're committed 100%. So. And we've never had, and this is after 2.5 months. This is after just a short, this all took place as soon as we came out with what everybody wanted to do. You know, I watched a gentleman today on television. He used to work with Lee Iacocca, a very respected automobile person, and he said, you know, because they're asking people, and they try and get as many negative people as they can, but they can't find them too much. It's pretty hard to find in terms of what we're doing, especially when they see all this investment. They said, so tell me, what do you think of what Trump is doing from the automobile standpoint? He said, I can't believe it. Somebody is finally, he's an older guy, real pro, really top guy, with Lee Iacocca. He said, I never thought I'd see the day when this would happen. where somebody had the courage to go and do what has to be done. This is transforming our nation. Our entire nation is going to be transformed, not only with the cars, but on every single other item that's built. We're going to become an industrial powerhouse. And he said that so beautifully today. In fact, I'm going to find out, I'm going to get a tape. And Bruce, I'm going to get that tape and I'm going to send it to you out in Long Island, and you're going to play it for the people and all your union workers and your non-union workers out there. You got a pretty even split. But we have, so far, it looks like we're going to have about $6 trillion of investments, and you wouldn't do that in years in this country over the last number of years. $6 trillion, and that's going to be much higher by the end of the year. And think of what $6 trillion is. You wouldn't have even a small percentage of that under this other system. We're going to be an entirely different country, and it's going to be fantastic for the workers. It's going to be fantastic for everyone. There will never have been a transformation of a country like the transformation that's already happening in the United States of America. It's an incredible thing to watch, and it's incredible to meet with the top people, people that you read about, very wealthy people, or people that are great managers and executives and presidents of big public companies, and to watch the enthusiasm they have now that they didn't have. They gave up on our country. They went to foreign countries and they built. Companies are pouring into our country at levels never seen before, with jobs and money to follow, and it's really beautiful. In the coming days, there will be complaints from the globalists and the outsourcers and special interests and the fake news. Always, the fake news will always complain. But never forget, every prediction our opponents made about trade for the last 30 years has been proven totally wrong. They were wrong about NAFTA. They were wrong about China. They were wrong about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which would have been a disaster if I didn't terminate it. If I didn't terminate that, United Auto Workers, you would have had no jobs in this country. You would have had no jobs. It was all going to other countries. In my first term, they said tariffs would crash the economy. Instead, we built the greatest economy in the history of the world. And again, I have great respect for President Xi of China, great respect for China, but they were taking tremendous advantage of us, and I commend them for that. I say, hey, if you can get away with it, that's okay. But, you know, they understand exactly what's happening, and they probably, most of them are saying it's about time they did something, but, and they're going to fight, and they're going to fight fair. Everyone's going to fight. You know, it's like, I say to the leaders, look, you got to take care of your country, but we have to start taking care of our country now. We can't do what we've been doing for the last 50 years. From the day of my election, the stock market went up in my first term 88%, with NASDAQ going up 155%, more than any president has ever had in any term in office, by far. And I think we're going to blow that away. And maybe the numbers won't show, but I think they're going to show much better than even those numbers. But what you're going to see is you're going to see activity, that empty, dead sites, factories that are falling down. Those factories will be knocked down, and they're going to have brand new factories built in their place. They're not only talking about renovating, they're talking about brand new, the best anywhere in the world, the biggest anywhere in the world. I have a friend who builds car plants, and I said, I want to see the biggest and the best. He said, well, we have to go to Mexico. I said, no, I want to see it in the United States. He said, we're not building them in there. This is a year and a half ago during the campaign. He said, we're not building it. You'd have to go to Mexico. When I was starting to decide to run, and I went to #1 in the polls very rapidly, I want to say, like, let's say in the first hour. And then shortly thereafter, it looked like I was going to win, and the fake news was saying, oh, no, don't do this. What they don't know is if I didn't win, they would have really been in trouble, because nobody wants to read them anyway. But I tell you what, when it looked like I was going to win, I announced that I was going to be doing exactly what we're talking about today. Great consistency, actually, because I've been talking about it for 40 years. But because I saw what was happening 40 years ago. If you look at my old speeches when I was young, very handsome, my old speeches, and that people would say, I'd be on a television show, I'd be talking about how we were being ripped off by these countries. I mean, nothing changes very much. The only thing that changed were the countries, but nothing really changes. But you know, it's why it's such an honor. It's such an honor to be finally able to do this. If you look at China, I took in hundreds of billions of dollars in my term, hundreds of billions. They never paid 10 cents to any other president, and yet they paid hundreds of billions, so much so that Biden couldn't do anything. They wanted to try and terminate it because he had a very special relationship with China. You know what the relationship was? He had a special relationship. But the numbers were so big, that they couldn't do it. So they did ease it up. They did things that they shouldn't have done. They made it a lot more comfortable for them, but they couldn't do it because the numbers were hundreds of billions of dollars, and I did that. And we were on our way to doing something like incredible. And then we had a very bad election happen, a very bad election. A lot of bad things happened. So when I said we got to do it again, I said we have to make it too big to rig. And we made it too big to rig, and we won in records, and it was a monumental win. And it was such an honor to see so many of you, like Brian and your friends, here with us to celebrate, and to more importantly celebrate what we're doing, because that wouldn't be a full celebration if we didn't do this, because this will be an entirely different country in a short period of time. It'll be something the whole world will be talking about it. The critics made the very tired predictions earlier this year, but in February, core inflation dropped to the lowest rate in 4 years. And the price of eggs, as you know, just in a month and a half, we were there for 4 weeks. And the first week, I got blamed for eggs. I said, I just got here. They said eggs have gone up at like 250%, and you can't get eggs. And they were going crazy. And I said, I just got here. And then we got to work on eggs, and we got to work on everything. And our great Secretary of Agriculture, you did a fantastic job. Brooke Rollins, she did a fantastic job. And as I said before, the price of eggs dropped now 59%, and they're going down more, and the availability is fantastic. They were saying that for Easter, please don't use eggs. Could you use plastic eggs? I said, we don't want to do that. We want to, and you really came through. It's an amazing job. Thank you very much, Brooke. You did great. But likewise, an old-fashioned term that we use, groceries. I used it in the campaign. It's such an old-fashioned term, but a beautiful term, groceries. It sort of says a bag with different things in it. Groceries went through the roof, and I campaigned on that. I talked about the word groceries for a lot, and energy costs now are down, groceries are down, gasoline is way under $3, and people are beginning to be able to buy things and live again. We brought prices way down. We created 10,000 already in a few weeks, new manufacturing jobs, and it was that took place in 1 month, numbers that they haven't seen in a long time. We had virtually no inflation under my term. We had virtually no inflation for 4 years, but after transitioning over to Sleepy Joe, it went from almost non-existent to the highest in the history of our country. They're the highest inflation in the history of our country, brought up by energy and bad spending and bad policy, and a lot of bad things happened. How about allowing millions and millions and millions of people to pour into our country with open borders, where it's so sad to see even now. And I see our great secretary you have done. Stand up, please, Christy. Stand up. Christy Noem and Tom Homan. These people are doing a great job, but gotten them out in records. And we have problems with judges that don't want them to go out. They want Tren de Aragua, and they want MS-13, the most vicious gangs ever. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. Absolute killer gangs. They kill people. They don't even think about it. And we put them out, and we have judges now, radical left judges that they don't want them to go out. They want them to even be brought back. Let's bring them back. You've done a fantastic job, and please thank everybody. Homeland Security, thank everybody. Appreciate it. And we now have a border that's the best border that we've ever had, even better than it was my first term. My first term we did good, but this one we really specialized in. We've done really well. And we had records then. We had the best, safest border. 4 years ago, we had the best border there ever was. And now we have, you've actually matched it and done even better. And we're going to get it down the right way. And we want people, by the way, to come into our country, but we want to come in through a legal process. We want them to come in legally. We need more people. We need people to run these plants and to help the auto workers and the Teamsters and the non-union people and everybody else. But we need people and the farmers. And we're going to let people come in, but they want to come in. We want them to come in legally. They have to have the capability of loving our country, not people that hate our country. We don't want them in our country. And now we're going to pass the largest tax cuts in American history, and that's where we're relying on Mike and John Thune. And we will not cut Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid benefits, and the Democrats will, because if they got in, the entire economy would collapse. This country was heading for a collapse under the people that you saw. They were horrible. I think one of the reasons people like the job, I have my highest approval ratings because I think they're comparing me to the worst administration in the history of our country. So I appreciate that at least. But Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and Senate Majority Leader, appreciate it, Mike. John Thune have been fantastic, by the way. But they've been working tirelessly on taking the next step to pass the plan for our one big, beautiful bill. And I'd like to name it that if you can. One big, beautiful. I made that statement about 6 months ago, and everybody calls it one big, beautiful bill. And it will be that. It'll have everything, the big tax cuts and every incentive there is. And it'll be fantastic. And by the way, for the cars, we're asking for an interest deduction on a loan. So if you build the car, only in America we do it, Brian. If the car's not built in America, you don't get the interest rate deduction. But if you build the car in America, if you buy a car, if it's built in America, then you get an interest rate deduction, tax deduction, and that's a big thing. It's going to be a big thing. I think that's going to pay for itself very quickly, that deduction. Never happened. We've never had anything like that before. Somebody said, where did you get the idea? Because it's so basic. You would think that would have happened a long time ago. It never did, and I'm very happy it didn't because now I can say that was my idea. But we're going to get us closer to the debt extension. We have to get the debt extension passed, and I know you're going to be able to do that, Mike, and it's very important that you do that. And all of the other things that the Senate budget plan gives us, along with working, because I know they're working together, John and Mike, and the two bills are going very well together. We need to get our shared priorities done, including certain permanent tax cuts. We want the tax cuts to be permanent, spending cuts, energy and historic investments in defense, border, and so much more. We're covering everything. These will be phenomenal. There'll be no bill like this going to straighten. One bill is going to straighten out our country for many, many years to come. And we said, let's just do it and let's get it done. And some guys will love it and some guys will like it a little bit less because they're not getting what they were exactly looking for, but they're getting a lot. They'll never, if we get this done, it'll be the most incredible bill ever passed in the history of our Congress and Senate and congressmen, the senators and the congressmen, many of whom are here today, will be very proud of themselves. I really believe that. It's going to set us on a whole new prosperous path. We're going to cut spending and right-size the budget back to where it should be. We're going to do that very strongly. Thank you, Rick. Thank you. John, thank you. Oh, look at all of our senators over there. Oh, boy, that's a nice group of people. But I won't like them so much if they don't get this bill done. That's a great group. And Congressman, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Tremendous people. The Senate plan has my complete and total support, and the House plan likewise is very similar. They're moving along pretty much at the same clip, and as soon as you're ready, you'll show it to me, and I'm sure it'll have my support, Mike. Every Republican congressman and senator must unify. We have to unify. We can't be separated. We have to get it done. We have to get absolutely everything we can, and we have to take care of the American people. That's the only thing that matters. We have to take care of the American people first. We need to pass this bill immediately, get it done, including debt extension. From this day on, we're not going to let anyone tell us that American workers and families cannot have the future that they deserve. We're going to produce the cars and ships, chips, airplanes, minerals, and medicines that we need right here in America. The pharmaceutical companies are going to become roaring back. They're coming roaring back. They're all coming back to our country because if they don't, they got a big tax to pay. And if they do, I'll be very happy. And you're going to be very happy and you're going to be very safe. We're going to build our future with American hands with American heart, American steel, and we're going to build it with American pride like we used to. We're approaching our 100th day as president and have been given credit by a lot of people, actually, even some of the fake news. Can you believe it? Which in this case, hopefully, isn't fake, for having done more in that time than any other administration in the history of our country in the first 100 days. I think we've had an amazing, in terms of what we've done, what we've gotten accomplished. I'd like to see if we can get that war ended and another war from not starting in the Middle East. We have to get Russia. They're losing 2,000 on average, 2,500 people a day, young people, soldiers, Russian. Think of that, 2,500 through some days, but on average, probably over about a 1 week period, it's 2,712, they say. They're losing those soldiers. They're dying. They're being decimated. And they're not from our country, but they're from other countries. But they're human beings. They're from Russia. They're from Ukraine in this period, most of them. And we're going to get it stopped. It's a senseless war that would have never happened if I was president, and it shouldn't be allowed to go on. And I think we're being given good cooperation by Russia and by Ukraine, but we have to get it stopped. It's humanity. It's humanity. It's a terrible thing. This will be a very big moment. I think you're going to remember today. It's going to be a free nation that we're dealing with. We're going to have a very free and beautiful nation. It's going to be Liberation Day in America, and it's going to be a day that hopefully you're going to look back in years to come and you're going to say, you know, he was right. This has turned out to be one of the most important days in the history of our country. God bless you and God bless America. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, you've been listening to President Trump as he makes his way over to the desk there where he will officially sign the executive order. Let's just let me know if there's no audio over there.
Good afternoon, y'all. We have two documents prepared for the president's signature today. One closes what's referred to as the de minimis loophole with respect to imports from the
Not even Hail Mary.
The other is the big one, is the reciprocal tariff executive order that the president just spoke about at length. This is obviously a huge deal, and it's been an honor to be part of the team getting started.
This is big stuff.
Olivia.
That's a 10. That's a good one. So I'm going to hand out these numbers.
All right, well, there you have it. The president is handing out those ceremonial pins, if you will. This is really customary whenever the chief executive signs any kind of order. He hands pins out to those in the crowd, and he's taking a moment to take it all in there. A day that he calls Liberation Day, a day that he hopes the American people will look back and say American industry was reborn on this day and America's destiny was reclaimed on this day. Of course, time will tell how these tariffs work out. Sweeping changes are coming as of midnight tonight. We want to bring in and talk through this announcement with, let's see if he answers any questions from the media. The media, just so you know, for a little behind the scenes, they're back a little ways behind the crowd that was gathered there in the Rose Garden, just steps from the White House as he says his final goodbyes, and members of the media shout questions that he either can't hear or won't answer. But I do want to bring in Paul Mueller. He's a senior research fellow with the American Institute for Economic Research. Paul, just walk us through your initial thoughts when you see and you hear, and we've got graphics being made right now of the reciprocal tariffs of what countries are currently charging us versus what we're going to charge them. There's a big printout of it there. Your initial thoughts, Paul, on this historic day for trade in America.
Well, you have to give Trump credit for being a big ideas person, a big thinker in terms of he really thinks big and wants to change things. And so he, presented this very sweeping view of the American economy, where it's been, where it's gone. There's a lot of directions we could go with this. I think there's nothing terribly surprising here in terms of the reciprocal tariffs. The real question in my mind is, what is the end goal here? And one thing that I didn't hear Trump say that I would love to hear clarified is whether he hopes that other countries will reduce their tariff barriers in response to us raising ours. It's kind of in the background. I assume this is something that he wants and would welcome, but I think it would reassure markets dramatically if he said, look, our goal is actually freer trade. We're raising our tariffs kind of because we think trade is unfair, but we hope that other countries will reduce their tariffs and then we will reduce ours. That, I think, would go a long way towards settling markets and towards showing that he still wants to be involved in trade around the world. He just wants it on a more level or equal playing field. So I think we missed that. I would have loved to hear him say that more explicitly.
Paul, I guess playing the other side here, the goal, I think Trump would argue, is, hey, we want things made and built in America. And if you don't want to pay these tariffs, then you have every opportunity to use for example, in the car manufacturing world, he says that, there are factories that are either closed, not open, not operating, or really underutilized. And so is that potentially the goal here, is that, hey, we want more Americans working and doing the jobs that we have for years outsourced?
That's right. That was a big part of his speech, talking about all the factories that closed, the decline in manufacturing, and he brought up very specific investment commitments of billions of dollars by different companies. And he does want to make a lot more things in the United States. Now, part of what he's saying isn't quite the whole picture. I mean, a lot of things are manufactured in the United States. So he highlighted some examples where manufacturing has sort of moved to other countries, but the U.S. still manufactures quite a bit. It's just with many fewer workers in certain kinds of sectors. And again, the goal here, this goal fits his broader economic policy with lower taxes and deregulation. That will also spur this investment. Again, a question that I have that I would love to know is, in terms of these foreign companies who are making big investment commitments, I wonder a little bit what he's giving them behind closed doors in terms of relaxing regulatory restrictions, giving them access to particular energy. Hopefully he's not giving away too much, but I do wonder what kinds of commitments or promises he's making these companies that's encouraging them to build domestically.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point and a good question. I kind of enjoyed the history lesson, if you will, that we got from everything from, the income tax beginning in 1913, before any of us were around, to the Great Depression that we know about from in 1929. In his view, the world in the early 1900s operated optimally, specifically for the United States when it came to trade and fair trade. Before all that, what are your thoughts there? You're the expert.
Sure, and he's right in the sense that pre-1913, the U.S. government was funded by and large through tariff revenue. I mean, that was how the federal government was funded for almost its entire history. But you have to understand that the government was a little bit different back then. There was no Social Security, there was no Medicare. We didn't have more than half of the departments that we have today. Now, again, they're slashing. So thinking about like the work of Doge, they're really trying to restructure the government, but they're not going to touch these big legacy programs. And so the kinds of revenue that the federal government needs to operate, even with the cuts that are being proposed and implemented, is just many, many times greater, like orders of magnitude greater than it was 120 years ago. And so tariffs are just not going to do the trick in terms of raising enough revenue. The tax rate you'd have to set on foreign goods would be so high that would actually discourage foreign trade more than it would raise revenue. And that's a big Achilles heel of this policy. He wants to try to get this fairness, raise rates, but the problem is we don't quite know how much less trade is going to happen. So a high tax rate on nothing is still nothing. And so that's going to be the real question in the coming months and years in terms of how do these higher rates affect the flow of goods and how many goods we actually tax coming in. So he's right on the history, but we have to acknowledge the different era we live in and be realistic about how these higher tax rates are going to affect trade.
I think that's fair. Would you agree with me that change is hard, right?
Absolutely.
And so if the president has this bold plan, if you will, and he thinks, hey, this is the way I think it can happen, in the interim, before, again, at some point, we'll all be able to look back and think, oh, that was a great idea, or man, did that fall flat. But to get there, what's going to happen to my pocketbook? People who are watching at home thinking, hey, it makes complete sense. If China charges me this, and now we're going to charge this to help level the playing field, it makes sense. But how does it impact me?
Sure. No, it appeals. It appeals to our sense of justice, of fairness. It's just sort of reciprocity. The issue is, again, it's a very dynamic situation here where we'll kind of see how other countries respond. But in the short run, it's going to raise prices of a lot of things. So we're going to see the prices of foreign cars go up pretty dramatically, very quickly. And that will probably lead to a rising price in domestic vehicles, not nearly as much, but some, because now Ford is going to have less competition from BMW or Toyota for these other companies. So we are going to see some prices rise in the short run. Some of them may rise a lot. And I think the Trump gamble here is that the tax cuts, which they're trying to get through, the deregulation and the lower energy prices will be enough to offset price increases driven by more protectionism and higher tariffs. So that's really the question. You know, it's going to be hard to see. A lot of people are uncertain, and, you know, they're kind of right to be uncertain. I follow this stuff every day, and I'm uncertain about exactly how this is going to play out. But there's no way you can implement tariffs of this magnitude without disrupting supply chains, without leading to a lot of reconfiguration of the economy, without causing many prices to rise compared to what they were pre-tariff. That's just going to happen. The question is, what's the magnitude going to be, and how much will other pro-growth policies offset those increases in prices?
So let's talk about automobiles for a second, because as of midnight tonight, the U.S. will implement a 25% tariff on all foreign-made vehicles. So basically, if that vehicle is built outside of the United States, then it will be hit with a 25% tariff. Now, in my opinion, and you're the expert, you can look at this two ways. You can say, yep, that's going to be passed on to you, the consumers. You want the BMW, you want the Mercedes, guess what? Now you're going to pay more for that. Or BMW and Mercedes could say, we like the U.S. market. We like it a lot because we sell a lot of vehicles in that market. Maybe we don't pass that full amount on. Maybe we take the hit in the short term because we want more people in our cars, and then they'll be in our auto shops and our body shops, and we'll sell parts and we'll do upgrades and this, that, and the other, and make money off that too. Am I looking at that through the right lens? Again, I'm kind of an optimist, Paul, if you can't tell, but I'm trying to make sense of it. And again, you're the expert.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's right. In economics, we have a technical term that's called tax incidence. And you're right, any kind of tax that's created in a tariff would be an example. The burden of that tax is going to be split between the buyer and the seller. And so just to make it very practical, suppose a brand new BMW is priced at $100,000 before the tariff, and then we implement this 25% tariff. If the price of that BMW were to go up to $125,000, then the consumers are just paying the tax, right? They're eating it all. What's going to happen, though, is it's going to, or if the price doesn't go up at all, if it remains at 100,000, even though BMW has to pay a $25,000 tariff, then BMW is eating all of the costs, right? It doesn't affect the American consumer at all. In reality, the tax incidence is going to be split. The price of the BMW is going to go up somewhere between $110,000, $120,000. So consumers will see the price go up some of the tariff. But we can expect that companies like BMW will be eating some of that cost as well and paying that. And again, where that tax incidence falls really depends on the market and competition. But there's always going to be some kind of split between the rise in consumer prices and also the payments on the importer side.
And ultimately, we have the ability to make of it what we want, in my opinion. And here's what I mean by that. We have the purchasing power, right? If I like the BMW, but Mercedes has gone a different route and they're saying, hey, we know we're paying more to send our cars to the United States, but again, we really like this market. I may buy a Mercedes. Or you know what? I may say, I love that Ford F-150 pickup truck because I know that's an American-made vehicle, right? I mean, can't we, the American people, is this an opportunity for us to really make a difference in what the future of our economy looks like and say, here's how we're going to spend our money? And won't the rest of the world be forced to listen?
Well, there's a couple parts to what you're saying there. So yes, the U.S. is the biggest economy in the world. And so our trade policy matters a lot for countries like Nigeria or Vietnam or these other places. And so they're going to take very seriously these tariffs that have been created at midnight. And I think they're going to respond in a variety of ways in terms of lowering and trying to get those tariffs down. And so that's a function of, as a country, we have a lot of buying power. And you're right, as consumers, we make that choice every day, what we spend our money on. And you can think about, the Made in America label can help certain products to sell. It can make them a better alternative to, a not Made in America product. Sometimes they can charge a slightly higher price. The challenge is that most people are often not willing to pay that much more for an American-made label. They're willing to pay 5%, 10%, maybe 25%. They're not willing to pay 2, 5, 10 times as much. And so I think what President Trump is trying to do here is it's kind of forcing us to do what a lot of people want to do anyway. So sort of forcing people to buy American, even if prices are higher. And also, if everybody does it, we might have more bargaining power. And again, he's thinking, the art of the deal here, trying to negotiate on behalf of the American people. Again, I wish I knew more of where he's trying to negotiate us to. But he very much sees our position as a negotiating position. That came out, in his speech a lot of looking out for Americans and American interests. And so he very much seems to have that mindset in how he's setting these tariffs and how he thinks it'll play out in terms of negotiations.
Right. So, there was a lot made of, how these tariffs are going to work. Obviously, that's a big question. But let's look at Cambodia, for example. That Cambodia caught my eye on this list because right now Cambodia is charging 97% on U.S. goods into Cambodia. And we're going to respond with a reciprocal tariff of 49%. You may be at home thinking, well, man, I don't know what I buy from Cambodia, and that's a fair thing. So I asked our research team behind the scenes to give me some numbers here. And last year, for example, Paul, $13.4 billion worth of goods were imported into the U.S. From Cambodia. So if I do the math of an additional 49%, and again, you can argue, look, they may see this reciprocal tariff and say, well, we're not going to send as many goods, and we may say, hey, we're not going to import as many, right? But that's an extra $6.5 billion just based on my, the easy math calculation. Am I looking at that right?
Yeah, that's what it would be if the trade was completely unchanged.
That's right.
And when you get some of the predictions, so you have someone like Peter Navarro in the White House saying we're going to raise $6 trillion from tariffs over the next 10 years, it kind of works. It's that kind of back of the envelope math. But it's important to remember that we live in a very competitive global economy and that prices matter a lot and price margins aren't always that large. And so it's foolish to expect that there will be no change in how much we import, right? That 13.9 billion. Right, I would be shocked if it stayed north of 10 with the kind of trade, with the tariffs that are being proposed here. And so you have to take that into account in terms of how much will trade be affected, even with the tariff being put in place.
We're going to get to our political director, Lindsay Keith, who was at the Rose Garden. But I do have one quick follow-up question for you, one final question for you, Paul. So if let's take, for example, you know, we heard from the United Auto Workers Union member. I think his name was Brian. He stood up and he talked about how great this is. And in 6 months to a year, he said, we'll see the benefits, which I think most people would say, that's really optimistic. But if you go from paying, and I'm going to make up numbers here, Paul, but if you go from paying someone in a factory in Mexico $3 an hour to produce car parts or whatever, to now, you know, because the only way to get away from these tariffs, to get around them, is you build here in the United States, right? So if they say, okay, we're going to bring that manufacturing job to the United States, but in Detroit, we're going to pay someone $30 an hour, the concern could be, well, man, the price of that car is definitely going to have to go up as well, right? Does that make sense? Am I tracking things the right way?
No, you are. I mean, there's some important issues here. So first, side point on that Detroit comment that Brian's made. One of the things where I disagree with President Trump and Brian there is they think that free trade is what drove the decline of auto manufacturing in Michigan, when in fact, I think the greater culprit is actually the UAW itself, you know, not having flexibility in wage arrangements and the wage prices. So that's an important issue to try to parse out.
And this is giving them more power.
For unions. That's right, exactly. It's putting the unions back in charge. Now, the other point you bring up is also a very important one, where labor costs differ dramatically between, say, the U.S. and Mexico. And that's important, but it's not the whole story. Because when you build a plant in Mexico, you have to think about the cost of materials, the cost of building, and also, very importantly, for some of these more developing countries, companies that go in there might have to build their own infrastructure. They might have to build their own power plant. They might have to hire their own security. They might have to build their own roads. And so even though the wages in a Mexico or Vietnam might be quite a bit lower than the U.S., because their infrastructure and technology are not as good, their cost advantage might not actually be that much greater over a U.S. manufacturing plant. And so even though the wages are much higher in the U.S., 10 times in your example, the price differential or the cost of building the car might not actually be that much more in the U.S. It might just be a little bit more because we have better infrastructure, energy, transportation, and so forth.
Right. Paul, thank you again for not only listening to the briefing with us, but being available on the backside to kind of walk us through it, because I think that's the big question is people hear something and, hey, let's go right to the experts, because you guys know what you're talking about. Paul Mueller, thank you for being with us. We want to get now to our political director, Lindsay Keith, at the White House. Again, she was at the Rose Garden when the event took place. Lindsay, your takeaway from this big announcement today.
Yeah, President Trump, you heard earlier saying that he believes, one of the most important days in American history. This has been long anticipated by this administration. It's been a campaign promise of his. No one quite understood the depth and the length that this administration was planning to go to when he would talk about tariffs on the campaign trail and say it was the most beautiful word in the English language. But now we're starting to see that this is not only a targeted approach, this is a broad, sweeping approach by this administration. It is really a part of their whole economic plan of how they're trying to approach this administration. And so this is not something that's going to go away, but this is the most poignant response that we've seen from them so far. There have been targeted tariffs on specific countries, our neighbors to the north and south so far, but they handed out what he was talking about up there at the podium, handed out to all the press corps that we could see. This was one of the big questions going into this speech today is, would there be this universal tariff or would it be reciprocal, which he had originally said that whatever another country tariffs for, that's what we'll do. And I thought it was very fascinating that ultimately, for many of them, it was half, and him saying that this is a kind tariff, and really showing that he wants to lower the trade deficit that we have with so many countries around the world. That's been one of his largest goals as well, that we have these abundant trade deficits and he wants to lower them. But the administration feeling very confident about this approach, even though, as you heard from Paul Mueller, there's a lot of optimism, but the markets are concerned, and American people polling shows are concerned about how long this would take. And Paul, and you brought this up earlier, but I thought it was one of the most fascinating points when you had Brian from the Auto Workers Union stand up, and he said, his expectation is that this would take 6 months to a year. The president saying it would be shorter than that, but that's been one of the biggest questions that has not been answered yet, is how long is this administration willing for this to take effect right right now, many Americans saying that they're not happy with how this president is handling the economy, that he's focused too much on tariffs and not enough on the economy, something that he campaigned heavily on as well, him even mentioning that in this Rose Garden speech, Chris.
Yeah, I want to mention the markets real quick, and I think we can show you the closing numbers. The markets actually closed before this announcement was made, Lindsay, and you take a look at the closed in the green, up 235 points, the Dow. But the real question is, what happens in the morning, right, when Wall Street and Main Street collide and the reciprocal tariffs begin at midnight. The Trump administration, though, to be fair, Lindsay, has said, and correct me if I'm wrong, hey, there will be some, and I'm paraphrasing, some growing pains here. And yes, we do expect prices to go up in the short term. The question is, how long does that short term last?
Right. That is the million-dollar question, Chris. Just how long is this transition period? That's what the administration calls it. We have Treasury Secretary saying that this is actually a detox period and that there is going to be some pain. The president even saying in his joint address to Congress just a few weeks ago, asking the American people to be patient with him. But the question is, how much grace are they willing to extend when this is one of the key issues that they were hoping that he would focus on the economy and bringing down the prices of goods, everyday goods, and many Americans in polling show that's something they don't feel like he is doing. So how long will this take is the question that no one has a direct answer for. But I would say you heard the president there saying that he believes it's shorter than 6 months or a year. So we'll see what that period is. But even some of the best economists saying that they can't really draw a line because we've never seen someone in the modern day take drastic tariff approaches like this. We've seen targeted tariff approaches, but never this broad sweeping approach. And so I think everyone is trailblazing on this path, wondering how this may not only affect the markets, but the cost of goods and services that so many Americans are reeling with still.
Yep, you're right. Lindsay Keith, live in front of the White House for us this afternoon. We do appreciate that. We'll see you tonight for the news on Merit TV, Lindsay. And it's a special day here on Merit TV as we celebrate 1 year of bringing you news that you can use. And tonight on the news on Merit TV, Dr. Phil will have a special announcement, including new ways that you can connect with him and learn more about his thoughts on issues just like the one we're talking about today. But for now, we're going to return you to Cops Reloaded, and this episode is called Scrapping Under the Full Moon, because in this episode, a suspect cuts his probation